I know. Back when I did Pryde of the X-Men, you guys in the comments were laughing, saying it would only be a matter of time before I got the villains. And I said, nah, I'm more of a heroes guy. Besides, they don't have the White Queen, so what's the point? Well, opportunity knocks. X-Men. Sometimes luck just lands in your lap, and I thought I was never going to have the arcade/cartoon villains from Pryde of the X-Men because they had never done a White Queen in the right costume, the right style. And I'd said the same thing about the heroes. I thought I was never going to put the heroes together because they would never make the right Dazzler. And then they did. And I was like, oh, well, now I got to chase those down. So I shouldn't have been so quick to think that Hasbro wouldn't, turn this one on me. And they did. But unfortunately, they put that White Queen in a 4-pack that was an exclusive called the Hellfire Club set. And I said, I'm not paying that amount of money just to get the White Queen. Well, Sal at 2 Cents Toys decided that he was going to sell off his Marvel Legends collection. And he wrote me and asked me if there was anything I was trying to put together. And I said, well, I'm trying to put together the Brotherhood of Mutant Terrorists from Pryde of the X-Men.
When the Brotherhood of Mutant Terrorists and I are through, humans will no longer have a place on planet Earth.
And I said, but that White Queen is really holding me back from doing that. And he said, oh, I've got that. And he said, what else do you need? And I said, well, probably not everything that you would have. And sure enough, aside from one, he had all of them. And I thought it would be fun to go through those with you and show you how I put together the Brotherhood of Mutant Terrorists. So let's get started.
It is the X-Men's sworn duty to protect mankind by battling Magneto and his evil terrorist mutants.
We'll start with the big man himself, Magneto. I knew I wanted something comic accurate, and Sal said he had the one from the Family Matters set, which was the 3-pack that came with Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch. So I bought that version of Magneto from him, which gives him 2 head swaps. So I've got the head where he's using his powers, kind of like he looked in the Pryde of the X-Men arcade game.
You are dead!
And then I've got the normal head, which will also give him a look like he had in the cartoon.
The mutant power circuit.
And at times in the arcade game. Now, for those of you who are paying attention, you're probably wondering why I have Toad here, because Toad wasn't a boss in the arcade game. But Toad was prominently featured in the Pryde of the X-Men cartoon.
Now make yourself useful. Go play in an airlock.
All right, mister.
And there was only one Toad that they've ever made in Marvel Legends that comes close to this design, and that's the one from the 20th anniversary range. Thankfully, Sal had him, so we grabbed him from that lot, and I have him to go alongside as Magneto's sidekick. Next up is Mystique. Now, this is kind of a mulligan because Mystique was a hidden boss in the Pryde of the X-Men game. She was actually disguised as Magneto the entire time you fight her. But she is in the game, and so I wanted to have her in my group. And this would be the Walgreens exclusive Mystique, which looks close enough to that art style as well as being more classic comic book. I know they're coming out with some late 90s cel-shaded X-Men action figures that look more like the 90s cartoon, and they're actively trying to make them look like a cartoon. But because my Pryde of the X-Men Heroes group does not have a cartoon look to them, I did not want my villains to have cel shading and things like that. So when Sal said he had the Walgreens edition, I thought, perfect, that's the exact one I need, and I think she looks great standing alongside Magneto. Next up, we have Juggernaut. Now, Juggernaut was a pretty straightforward choice. I had Colossus from that 2-pack that Juggernaut came with, and so it was only fitting that I got the Juggernaut from that 2-pack from Sal, because it's the most classically decoed Juggernaut they've made. The one they made earlier that was single-packed had a more dark brown kind of deco pattern, and it doesn't look like the classic Juggernaut that's in Pryde of the X-Men.
Juggernaut will flatten you.
Next up is Pyro, who is the first boss in the X-Men arcade game.
Pyro will turn you to toast.
Pyro was an easy choice. He came in the 2-pack with Rogue, and he looks pitch perfect right from the off. There's nothing you really need to do to him. Pyro fits right into a Pryde of the X-Men group, no problem.
Welcome Welcome to Asteroid M! Don't you just love a good Barbie?
After Pyro, we should probably talk about the boss of the end of the second level of the arcade game.
Nothing moves the blob!
Now, fortunately for me, the Blob has recently, and only recently, been redesigned, revised, and re-released by Marvel Legends. His original figure was very ugly, very gross, reminded me of Baron Harkonnen from Dune, but very fortunately, they have revised the Blob for their 60th anniversary line. I did not have this one, Sal did not have this one, but when he came down to visit a few weeks ago, he surprised me with a parcel in the mail that was delivered while he was here, and it happened to be the 60th anniversary Blob. He told me, well, since your Brotherhood has come from my collection, it only seemed fitting for me to cap it off for you with the Blob. Sal, thank you so much. You didn't have to do that, but I really appreciate your generosity and your friendship.
That was the most unselfish thing I've ever seen in my life.
Now, the big one we have to talk about is the White Queen. Now, for those of you who have played the arcade X-Men game for a long time or often, or you know it really well, you're probably saying, well, the White Queen was more like a mini-boss. She wasn't really the boss of a level. She was like a mid-level boss.
The White Queen welcomes you to die.
But she's featured in the opening animation screens of the arcade game, as well as prominently featured in the cartoon episode itself. So I had to get her, and thankfully Sal had the entire Hellfire Club set, and I got the whole set from him, and so I now have the White Queen as well. She looks amazing, and unfortunately, because of the way Hasbro distributed her, she really is the unicorn for this grouping, and for a lot of different groupings for X-Men villains, sadly, from that era. A lot of people are out of luck, and that sucks, but I'm really, really glad that I was able to secure one for my collection, and I couldn't be more thankful to Sal. Now, the last two in this grouping were a little bit of a compromise, I admit. Sal told me that he had the Build-A-Figure Wendigo and he had Nimrod. And I was like, oh. I said, well, I know they've made Wendigo, but I don't know what he looks like. And Sal said, well, he doesn't look as close to the Wendigo in the arcade game as the 2008 Hulk Fing Fang Foom Wendigo. That's a big mouthful, but it's a Marvel Legends 2008 range of 6-inch scale figures, of which Wendigo was one, and the Build-A-Figure was Fing Fang Foom. That being said, it does look closer to the classic 70s, 80s Wendigo that we're familiar with from the comics. However, Sal did not have that version, and we both agreed from the photographs that that one looked too gray for the Wendigo in the game. It looked more correct in the sculpt, but not so much in the deco. And because Sal had the Build-A-Figure version, I thought, I'm going to pick him up while I've got the chance. Lastly, we have Nimrod. Now, this is not the Nimrod version from the arcade game. And if you listen carefully in the arcade game, Nimrod in that level as the end boss screams identically to the Rancor from Return of the Jedi. Fun fact. But funnily enough, they've only made one Nimrod ever in the Marvel Legends Hasbro range, from what I can tell. And it is this other version from the 3-pack that came with Psylocke and some other rando that I can't remember. But this is the only version of Nimrod that you can get, and it's from that 3-pack. And I thought, well, there is a Nimrod that exists. He is from the comics. I'm just gonna grab him just to have him represented. The last major X-Men arcade game boss I don't have is Living Monolith, but Marvel Legends has not made Living Monolith, so I haven't missed out on anything, and if he ever gets made and he's in a version that's close enough to the arcade game, then I'll pick him up. Some of you might be ready to play gotcha and say, well, Michael, you don't have the Reavers. The Reavers are mid-level bosses in the arcade game, and while, yes, White Queen was as well, the Reavers don't really play a part in the Pryde of the X-Men cartoon. Therefore, I did not prioritize them. They are very expensive secondhand, and they just don't really appeal to me anyway. I really just want that group, that iconic grouping of villains, most of whom are end-level bosses. So there you have it. These are my Brotherhood of Mutant Terrorists, and I'm so glad this grouping is finally finished to go alongside my Pryde of the X-Men heroes. I'm gonna have to redo my Marvel Legends shelf to figure out a way to get them on that shelf so they can face off against the X-Men properly, but I really am excited. I am still toying with the idea, no pun intended, of finding that 2008 Wendigo just to see how it compares, because the sculpt looks so close, even though Wendigo himself is way too gray yellow. He's more more like gray yellow rather than white blue. And that is kind of an aesthetic shortcoming, but I just want to see how he looks in this group compared with the Build-A-Figure Wendigo, who is so extreme. I'm not hating him because he has the right color and the right deco, but I'm just not sure if he would be as perfect to slot in as the 2008 Wendigo. And I'm really curious. Finally, just one more time, I want to thank Sal from 2 Cents Toys once again. Thank you for making this dream of mine a reality. Thank you for offering these up for sale and helping me complete this goofy quest to have what I'm dubbing the Betamax of X-Men Heroes versus Villains. I know I fall into that weird category of people who were just of a certain age where we found out about X-Men through this weird kind of back door. Most people, they found out about X-Men either through the comics or through the 1990s cartoon, and I fell right in the middle. I fell right between the cushions, so to speak, and I discovered the X-Men through this one episode show and this amazing arcade game that was ubiquitous in every shopping mall in America around that time. And they're some of my best gaming memories. So I love the Brotherhood of Mutant Terrorists, and I love Pryde of the X-Men. And I'm so glad that this is finally done. So I'm going to go figure out how to get these on my shelf. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.
X-Men.